motorcycle suspension bolt, motorcycle shock bolts. This video is video 2 of 2. If you didn't see my first video, I advise you to take a look at that first so it puts everything together here. And basically what happened in the first video, riding along, no bumps or dips in the road, and all of a sudden a loud snap, tremendously loud, and next thing you know, the back bolt that holds the progressive 422 shock had snapped off. So what did I think of? What could it have been that forced that bolt to crack? Well, the first thing that comes to mind, it was a defective bolt. I mean, hey, maybe the manufacturer bought a lot of bolts from North Korea or something. I mean, what do I know? Or maybe somehow it became loose and I didn't pick it up. I mean, it's under the bike, so who looks under the bike all the time? Well, once a year when I change the oil and I change the transmission, I do. And I do check the bolts on the shocks and stuff. But just to see if they're tight. So my main guess was that it was a defective bolt. And when I got it up to Wild Steed Works, Curtis took a look at it, and I decided to get a whole new set of shocks because I just wasn't going to replace one. I don't know if you could just buy one. And so one had, 75,000 miles on it and one would be brand new. Hey, that would be stupid. So I wanted a new set of shocks and I wanted a new set of bolts. Now, speaking about bolts, just looking at it from the non-mechanic's point of view, it looks like one bolt goes through the shock, then goes through a fitting in the bike, like a tube type fitting, and put a nut on the other end. So one bolt holds on the front shocks and one bolt holds on the back shock. Well, I was totally wrong. I mean, take a look at this diagram. There are actually 4 bolts, and the reason for that is it's a tight space under there. You couldn't get one long bolt in, so you have 4 bolts on there. So I told Curtis, let's replace the bolts with the best that he could get, and he got me a new set of progressive 442 shocks that he put on there. Now, after taking the old shocks off, my theory of the defective bolt pretty much vanished because he said when he took off the remaining shock, the left shock, the bushing that's inside the eyelet of the shock that the bolt goes through was gone. Here's Curtis finishing up the installation of the new progressive shocks and what he had to say about the situation. Annual inspection, what would I be looking at? Could you point?
So on an annual inspection, you just come over, grab the shock, just make sure you can't move it around, because being able to move it around where the eyelet moves up and down, etc., tells you that that inner polyurethane bushing has failed. So you would need to pull the bolt out and pull that bushing out in order to put a new one in. Because if you get a bushing that has failed, and let's say on this side the shock is exerting no force on the bolt, but on this side it's exerting force, anytime this will increase in length and shrink, all the force is going to be focused on this one good bolt, and this bolt is just going to get secondary force. So what will happen is you'll get twice as much stress on this bolt, and eventually it'll lead to failure. So it's important to make sure that everything is holding its own underneath here, and it's all taking an equal amount of stress so that you don't have a failure in one point.
Now, since this is the first time in riding for 40 years I ever had a shock problem, what do you think? Just an annual inspection is good enough? Or
I think if you keep an eye on it, make sure, as I said earlier, make sure that the bushings are in good condition and nothing is isolated where it's taking more force than anything else. I suspect that it should be okay for the life of the bike.
Yeah, but I mean, just look at it at the start of the riding season.
One look at it at the start of the riding season. Like I said, grab the shocks, make sure you can't move them. Take a look at the bolts, make sure they haven't backed out at all. And that's really all you need to do. Make sure that
if that inner lining thing was loose or deteriorated, what Progressive sells them, you just take the bolt out and pop a new liner in there?
Correct.
Okay, appreciate it.
And then maybe because much like your handlebar bushings, don't last forever. These eyelet bushings won't last forever either. So every 3 to 5 years, it would be a very good idea to just change them out just for safety's sake.
Okay. Appreciate that, Curtis.
You bet.
Producer's footnote. As I said before, I always check that the bolts were secure on the shocks, usually when I changed my oil and transmission fluid, but I never spent the extra couple of seconds to see if there was any play in the shocks. That was a very costly mistake, and one that could have been really tragic too. So I think it's smart advice to follow. Not only that, but you know, if you ever had a bolt shear off, it is a pain in the ass to try and get that bolt out, especially in a location like this. I mean, Curtis had to take off the whole back wheel and take off the swinging arm to get that bolt out of there. So, hey, just a word to the wise and an extra thing to check on your annual inspection. Thanks for watching. Be sure to visit our very popular motorcycle blog. It's San Diego Custom Motorcycles.info. And when you're there, mark it as one of your favorites. Also, be sure to get a subscription to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our future videos. Hey, thanks for watching.